Hey everyone, this is Mason Hutchison, and welcome back to Herb Rally, your daily herbal podcast. We come out with new episodes about 5 days a week, so be sure to tune in often. Our goal for the show is to help you along your herbalist journey no matter what stage you're at. We have over 500 episodes, so feel free to peruse those episodes and you're bound to find something of interest. Today's episode is a fun Instagram live that I did with Kelsey Barrett from Land of Verse. And Land of Verse is an online herb school, an experiential herb school as they like to call it, because they provide you with herbs so you can experience the herbs as you're learning the herbalism and herbal preparations and whatnot. So you can learn more about them at landofverse.com/herbrally. And if you use coupon code herbrally, you'll get 5% off tuition of any of their courses. So yeah, I've known Kelsey for years now. She has a clinical practice. She's a very experienced herbalist, and we had a really great conversation on how to save money while nourishing yourself, or frugal nutrition, if you will. Yeah, I took all sorts of notes before the show of things that I wanted to cover, and then I realized you can't cover that much stuff in 30 minutes. So it inspired me to create an entire module for our ever-expanding sliding scale course called The Art of Frugal Nutrition, and I'll leave a link to that in the show notes. But yeah, so I'm really excited to create this module. It's not out yet, but currently on The Art of Frugal Nutrition, we have 5 modules. That's fermentation, dumpster diving, the spice apothecary, bone broth, and our newest one is with Shayna Lipner-Grover, and it's called Eat Your Weeds. We just published that. So currently you have access to 5 modules, and I'm going to be working on this in the coming months, and that'll be our next module, and it'll be appropriately named The Art of Frugal Nutrition, and we're going to go into all sorts of different ways to save money on eating healthy. So I'm really excited to produce that. In the meantime, I really hope you enjoy this about 30-minute conversation I had with Kelsey Barrett from Land of Verse. And one more time, if you want to check out their school, go to landofverse.com/herbrally and use coupon code herbrally at checkout, and you'll get 5% off tuition. Thank you so much for listening. If you've enjoyed the show, please rank and review in your podcast player of choice. It really helps us out a lot, and I love to read the written reviews, so always brings a smile to my face to know what y'all think of the show. So thanks again, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye. A little bit of housekeeping before we get into the show. The content in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to cure, diagnose, treat, or prevent any disease. This information has not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. We are not doctors, nor do we play one on the internet. Please seek advice from a qualified healthcare professional. Okay, MC Calico, take it away.
Yeah. Smoking herbal blends. We need some Mullen and some Kush, my brethren. While listening to Herb Rally podcast again. Herbalism at its finest with Mason Hutchison. Yeah.
I'm excited to talk about this. It's actually one of the biggest parts of my clinical practice is making herbs and food accessible. It can be so expensive. So I'm really excited to talk about this and why, just easy hacks. And you've been, exploring this so much in your work recently. So I'm curious to hear your insights too.
Yeah, so how I got started, since I was a little kid, I was very interested in saving money for whatever reason. I remember we would have this like $1 a week allowance as a kid, and I remember my brothers would always go out and buy candy or whatever, and I would save up for like the big toy or whatever. So I don't know, and then later in my life, I became interested in nutrition, and just lo and behold, the two passions converged as far as living a simple life, one where I'm nutritionally, I got really into nutrition, so it's just kind of like a combination of the two.
Yeah, I mean, it's practical, right? And like a lot of the things that we love about herbalism are part of like just everyday life and folk medicine. So I can appreciate that it's just kind of, it was normal. It was just how you got by. And, personally, I see a lot of clients now. I've grown this practice, which is really strange, but people will come to me after they've seen a naturopath and they're getting like 10 to 15 supplements that they have to buy a month, and it's $400 to $500, and they're like, can you convert this into herbs? And so it's actually been this strange side business in my clinical practice, is helping people integrate complex naturopathic supplements into basic herbal medicine. So I think it's practical and also like strangely a useful skill right now to know how to really effectively use herbs and pull the chemical constituents out of them. So yeah, so tell me a little bit, like, I know that it can be tough for people stepping into, I don't know, it's easy to get fanatical, right? It's easy to get really obsessive with doing this all perfectly. So what's kind of your approach with all of this?
Yeah, exactly. I would say in my early 20s, and I don't want to like downplay anybody's dietary philosophy or whatever, but I used to be, right when I got into nutrition, I became vegetarian, then vegan, then raw vegan. I did fruitarianism for a little bit. I fasted all the time, and so I feel like I've had like this wide range of experience when it comes to diet. Lo and behold, now I'm a omnivore, but yeah, I would say I tended towards fanaticism and everything, but now I just try to, I definitely don't judge others by their dietary journey, and I don't judge myself anymore. I think that it's, especially if you're trying to save money on food and you're not spending, you know, exorbitant amounts on organic produce and whatnot, it's you should just not judge yourself. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about philosophy and that there's not a perfect way to do this, but that there's really, you know, I think easy ways to step in. And one of my favorite preparations for stepping into affordable nutrition is doing infusions. I've actually just nourishing infusions, old school, like, you know, rosemary and Susan weed, and doing a huge chunk of herbs, like a third of herbs in a quart jar, and then filling the rest up with hot water overnight and really pulling out the chemical constituents. It's such an affordable way to use herbal medicines. And, you know, the more that I dive into issues like around the gut and lymph system, the water preparations are actually an easier way to access those systems. So one of my favorite ways to have frugal nutrition and herbalism in my life is doing nourishing infusions on a daily basis.
Same. I actually I made a couple today. Really got a metal one. And I
Nice.
don't know if you know my little hack. I use a sprout spoon to strain it.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's clever.
Yeah, so I do that.
Oh, that's so clever.
Of course, there's, you know, you got to still squeeze out the extra goodness. You use cheesecloth or whatever. But yeah, I did the math earlier today, and oat straw is on sale at Mount Rose right now for half off. That's not like a advertisement or anything. I just noticed it, so I bought some. But you could drink a pint of oat straw infusion every day for a month and only spend, I think it was like $12.
Wow.
But yeah, it's super mineral packed. I'm drinking that almost on a daily basis.
That's amazing. I love that. And then one Easton, who's in the chat, is drinking cleavers and milky oats that she brewed last night. That's so beautiful. I mean, I think that a huge part of, you know, overnight infusions and water infusions are good at extracting minerals. And in my experience, in my clinical practice and at the school, people are so mineral deficient. It's really unbelievable. And specifically oat straw has such a high, it's got really high calcium and also has vitamin E, which is really interesting. So it's not only antioxidant, it's helpful for building bones and nourishing tissue and structure. Bones and teeth. And then of course, vitamin E is like one of the most high intensity antioxidants that we have. And so I feel like oat straw for people that are tired, wired, kind of burned out and exhausted, which is pretty much everyone after, you know, the last few years we've had for whatever, what did you say, $12.70, you can actually be rebuilding your, you know, your mineral reserves in your body and nourishing yourself. Like that's so accessible for people.
Yeah, I would love to know, say if you drank a pint of oat straw infusion for an entire month, what the amount of minerals. I know it's high in magnesium as well, which most Americans are deficient in. I'm just curious, like, how much are you getting over the course of a month? I know for me, when I stop drinking nourishing infusions, I just become anxious. Like my sleep quality goes down. Oat straw for me specifically is my jam. I like nettle infusion too, but I noticed it's definitely more on the stimulating side. But yeah, I gotta have my oat straw infusion on a regular basis.
Yeah, nettle is one of the, people, it's a go-to and it's really drying. So if you have a dry constitution at all, it can be pretty aggravating. And, Matthew Wood says nettle's like the old grandmother that comes through with her broom and kind of wakes everybody up, like wakes up all the organs, snaps them into shape. So it can be really stimulating for people. It's true. Yeah.
I want to say I've heard Paul Bergner speak about adding marshmallow root to nettle infusion in order to kind of balance that out. And actually, I got some right here too. And I don't know if you can see on the camera or not, but it's like super slimy. You probably can't see that, but there's so much mucilage in there. And so sometimes when I'm making nettle infusion, I'll add a little marshmallow root as well.
Yeah, marshmallow is one of those ones. I was working with a woman who she was from Mexico. She did cacao ceremonies, and she was drinking cacao every single day, like these traditional Mayan cacao beans. She was given permission to carry these Mayan cacao, and she was so dry. Like she was just like so dehydrated. And I gave her a quart of marshmallow infusion, and she drank it every single day, all day long. She just became obsessed with it. Like the marshmallow is so good at this time of the season when people are starting to dry out and get really dehydrated for that internal moisturization. And the dryness that comes can create a lot of tension, and in that tension and dryness can actually cause toxic buildup in the tissues. So, really, we're talking about frugal nutrition, and part of using herbs wisely is really understanding the energetics and how to balance our body. And then we're not, using random things. It's like actually using precision to nourish ourselves. I think that can be a big part of using frugal nutrition effectively.
Yeah.
Using herbs with precision.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, and so you talked about oat straw and marshmallow as being like two of your go-tos. And then we talked about a little bit about nettle, which of course has like you said, magnesium. It has zinc to support the immune system, which is so important right now as we're entering the winter. And then it also has selenium in it, which is not the easiest. It's not the easiest chemical or mineral to find, but it's super essential to thyroid and hormone metabolism, reproductive health, DNA synthesis, and infection. So yeah, if someone was really doing like a marshmallow, nettle, oat straw infusion daily for a month, it could make a huge impact. And I imagine that's probably around $15 a month.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And you said selenium. Are Brazil nuts high in selenium? Is that what I'm remembering correctly?
Brazil nuts are high in selenium. That's true.
And those are, and I remember when I first got into nutrition, I learned that. So I was buying like probably $60 a month worth of Brazil nuts. Probably not on the frugal nutrition spectrum, but was it nettle or marshmallow you said was high?
Nettle's high in selenium. Yeah.
Oh, great. Well, there you go. Just drink some nettle infusion. Way cheaper.
Yeah, I know. You can ditch the Brazil nuts, the $60 of Brazil nuts. Yeah, I think it's a big barrier to entry. I know at our clinic, in our student clinic at Verse, we have students that have been, it's part of the questionnaire now. It's like, how much can you spend on herbs per month, and what forms do you prefer? Because powders and loose leaf herbs are really the most accessible way into taking herbs every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Pardon the interruption. The show will be back on shortly. People will sometimes say, Mason, how can I support you in your work? There's so much free content on Herb Rally, and it'd be nice to give back somehow. I used to say, please rank and review the show. It means the world to us, which is still great. Please rank and review in your podcast player of choice. But now I'd say becoming an Herb Rally Schoolhouse member is one of the best ways you can support our small family herbal business. If you've ever heard of Patreon, it's kind of like that. Basically, you're directly supporting our work by spending $10 a month and becoming a member of the Herb Rally Schoolhouse, or patron, if you will. Membership includes exclusive content, and we release new content each week. And the library of available content just keeps growing over time with a variety of teachers and classes, which means the schoolhouse just keeps offering more, adding more value to you as you continue on your herbalist journey. There's also a bunch of discounts for cool herbal businesses in there as well, plus some other features to the membership. So if you'd like to check it out and get your first 30 days for free, you can use coupon code PODCAST when you register at herbrally.com/schoolhouse. Again, that's herbrally.com/schoolhouse and use coupon code PODCAST at checkout to get your first 30 days for free. Thanks so much for your time and support. Now back to the show.
So tell me what else you're up to with Frugal Nutrition, Mason. I feel like you're kind of been exploring all sorts of things. Like, what else is kind of exciting for you right now?
Oh man, like I said, I've been exploring this topic forever now, and I just there's so many things I want to touch on. But do we want to? We'll tell the chat that we did create a blog post with all these different resources, that all the topics that we're not going to get to essentially. But I would say I kind of want to touch a little bit on the free food side of things, and I know so Landaverse is focusing primarily on nourishment this month, right? But nourishment that you could obtain. We don't need to go into the dumpster diving and all that stuff, but I did want to touch on urban foraging briefly, because there's probably still some fruits out there for some of you all. I would imagine, like, you know, apples and whatnot. At least I've seen some around here, but I wanted to talk about urban foraging, getting into the idea of trying to find free food, because the idea of frugal nutrition is spending as little money on food as possible per month to nourish you and your family. If you're not spending money, that's going to really help lower your grocery bill. One of the things you can get into is urban foraging, and one way to do that is there's a website called fallingfruit.org, and basically it's a nationwide map. And people just mark out these different fruit trees, different herbal medicine, all this stuff, and you could look in your neighborhood, and chances are you're going to find something in your area where you could learn to pick these different fruits and whatnot.
That's a pretty amazing resource. When I lived in Berkeley, there was a resource like that, but it was just for Berkeley. So I love that this is like a nationwide sketch, and yeah, certainly if more landscapes had fruit trees, people would be eating for free. So I'm going to check it out.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing website.
What else? I mean, I definitely dumpster dived in college, but what other free food resources do you have for people? It's an interesting angle.
Yeah. So, I wanted to mention, I brought up my apple picker. You could buy these. It's really long. It reaches really high, but getting a tool like this is super useful for urban foraging. You're going to want to talk to, your neighbors if it's on private property or whatever. But there's lots of other options. Again, it's like a seasonal thing. Learning the local weeds that grow around you. So it's not particularly useful right now. Back in the day, I used to volunteer for a nonprofit called Fruitful Lane County, and they had this community garden behind this church, and I would volunteer there once a week, and every week I would go home with like 2 grocery bags full of produce that I would help me and my roommates out with. Again, like, this is going to be all on the blog post, but I have all these different resources for ways to obtain free, a lot of times organic, good stuff.
Amazing. Yeah, it's funny, like, there's so many things that are kind of off the shelf that you can get that are now being put into supplement pills. Like, I've been noticing that broccoli sprouts, you can now buy like a whole container of dried ground broccoli sprouts for like $90. And it's like, oh my God, broccoli sprouts are so affordable. And they are really important in the Krebs cycle for energy metabolism. And they have sulforaphane, which has been is super important in phase 2 liver detox. So they've been, doing studies on rats, which is all about liver health and the function of energy production in the body. And so it's just really interesting, like, what's free or extremely accessible that is sort of being picked up by supplement companies and put into really expensive supplements. You know, another one, like, I mean, and I've bought some of these things too, right? And been like,
Sure.
oh my God.
We're all
Another
guilty.
one is you can buy pectin, basically citrus pectin, for about $75 for a small jar. I bought it because I was like, I want pectin. And little did you know, it's just like, well, I could have stewed some apples or just eat the
Yeah,
pith of your orange,
right.
right? And they're which is also incredibly good for the liver, the pectin, and bind as a binder as well in the body. So there's so much accessible and free things, and just getting it through our food. But I feel like the supplement industry is very good at picking up certain things and marketing them well. So I'm glad we're demystifying some of this.
So I've sprouted a lot in my day. I have not ever been too successful with broccoli sprouts, so maybe it was money well spent on your behalf. But I do alfalfa sprouts all the time, and this jar right here, full of alfalfa sprouts, it was 50 cents. I mean, I did the math. Um, yeah, and I would just imagine something like this would be $5 in the store, so it's like a tenth of the price if I'm doing my math correctly. But
Right. So you've got, what you're telling me is you're doing overnight infusions, you've got your apple picker, and you're
yeah,
sprouting. Got
yeah,
it. Yeah. So it's really about lifestyle, like building things into lifestyle, taking the time to basically process food.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. My daughter points out, like, we'll buy something in the store, say hummus or whatever, and then I'll be like, oh, how do we make that? And we don't buy hummus anymore. We just make hummus. You know, it's just become a part of our lifestyle. Part of me just feels privileged in the sense where I'm like, I'm geared to want to do that. I don't know if everyone is that interested in cooking or culinary, you know, creations, but I'm all about it. So if I learn to make something, chances are unless I'm in a pinch, I almost always just make it now.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, like I said, like some things, like for example, kraut. Kraut is so inexpensive if you make it at home, but even if you buy sauerkraut or especially kimchi, the potency of 2 ounces of sauerkraut has more probiotics than 100 capsules of probiotics. So 4 to 6 ounces of fermented vegetables have around 10 trillion bacteria. So you would have to spend like hundreds of dollars in probiotics to get what you can in a few bites. And I feel like we've been convinced that we need these sort of like expensive, fancy supplements, when really we just need some. You're already doing your sprouting, I'm doing fermenting, you've got your apple picker, I've got an apple orchard. You know, it's so much more accessible than we think.
Yeah, and then you throw in the fact that a lot of these probiotic supplements don't have the prebiotic aspect to it, whereas the sauerkraut has both. And by the way, yeah, I'm fermenting all the time too. I got this big batch of sauerkraut. We make this regularly. But yeah, I mean, a jar like that in a natural food store, I would imagine costs $12. I
You're
don't know what
really
the math
walking
on it
your
is.
talk, Mason. You brought all your jars to the Instagram
If
live.
you, I should show you the whole side over here. I brought all sorts of stuff to the live, but
What are you doing with those beets?
well, so another concept that I really like is the idea of like cooking with scraps. So a lot of people will, they just don't know, right? So they'll just throw away the parts of the plant that they didn't know are useful. This is probably becoming more common knowledge, but you could eat beet greens, but it doesn't stop there though. Like there's all sorts of things you could do with lots of different vegetable parts. But what I'll do with these is I'll make beet kvass, another fermented drink. Then I'll roast the beets after having made the beet kvass, and then I'll saute the greens, or I'll do something with the greens. So I'm trying to use every part of the plant or animal, if you will. Same with like carrot ends. You could use the whole thing, and there's
Yeah, I
just
mean, they're so good for
countless ways.
broth as well, right? Like you
Yeah,
can really
exactly.
easily. My grandmother did that. Every single veggie scrap she kept in a container in the freezer. I mean, she was a Depression era baby, so every single scrap got made into a soup at the end of the week. It's so effective.
Yeah, another thing I wanted to touch on was this idea. Have you heard the term mulligan stew?
No, I've never heard of that.
So, do you remember the author Shel Silverstein?
Yes,
He's a
definitely.
poet. Anyways, I would read that with Amelia all the time. But in one of the poems he writes about mulligan stew, so I was like, oh, I have to find out what that is. And I've been doing this all along. It's basically just what your grandma did too, is taking all the scraps in your house and you're essentially turning it into a stew of sorts. It's also called like hobo stew.
Well, I'm going to call it Mary Lou stew because that's the name
Okay,
of my grandmother.
that's got a ring to it.
Mary Lou stew.
I
I
like
like
that.
mulligan stew too. Hobo stew is funny. I mean, that's great. I actually didn't know that that was a whole thing. I
Yeah,
had no
that's the
idea.
thing. I also left a link to a great video on YouTube on like the whole process. And yeah, way to do it.
Yeah, beautiful. And I mean, I
Yeah.
think that that brings us also to bone broth, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's another huge one, and it's getting so popular, but I don't really think people understand the some of the medicinal value of bone broth. I think people are like, drink bone broth, but they don't exactly know why. And bone broth is a traditional remedy across cultures for sick and weak people, and it was classically put into, like, when it was used in cooking, it was put into other things, like if you were making rice, or if you were making a congee, or if you were making a gruel. And gruels are another huge kind of survival food of just very watered down grains. But the broth is healing and coating to the gastrointestinal lining. I don't think we've ever had an experience probably in history where people's digestive tracts are so imbalanced. And so pulling in bone broth as part of a daily practice or a weekly practice is, I think, really important for connective tissue, for the skin, lungs. And I mean, it's kind of a beauty treatment. People are spending a lot of money on collagen and internal supplements for beauty, when really bone broth has so much gelatin in it. And in Chinese medicine, the bone broth and gelatin was known as a tonic herb and a supplement for weakness. And it was said to be nourishing and enhance the body's resistance to disease. And they said that bone broth and gelatin specifically tonified the blood, which is really interesting because we now know that gelatin has glycine, and that plays a vital role in the creation of blood. So we can look to these traditional places and say, yeah, we are all kind of on the bone broth train, but what is it really doing? How is it enhancing our health? And it's an easy addition to the mulligan stew or the Mary
Yeah.
Lou stew, however you want to
Yeah.
put it.
And it goes perfectly in line with frugal nutrition because I consider bone broth essentially free in my household. I mean, technically, there's probably heat costs associated with it, water, I suppose. But yeah, it's essentially free because everything I'm using only frozen vegetable and bone scraps essentially. I mean, and then some spices and vinegar. But yeah, and I consider it one of the most healthy form of food substances that I consume.
Yeah. And I just want to throw out there, because I have a strong clinical practice, and that there are a lot of people that have kind of a negative reaction to bone broth. They actually
Right.
can't digest it that well. And sometimes if you put it in a pressure cooker, it has less histamines. So if you're one of those people that's on the fence with bone broth, you might want to try a pressure cooker, and that saves a lot of time, right? You can have a really nice cup of bone broth in 45 minutes and be done.
Sounds like a win-win.
Yeah.
I've never heard of
Not
that.
only are we talking about frugal nutrition, we're just talking about practical, fast family nutrition and health that's easy.
Yeah. Cool. That's a good tip.
Yeah. So Mason, tell me what else about, tell me more about frugal nutrition. Like, what else is on your mind? We talked about sprouting and nourishing infusions, cooking with scraps and mulligan stew, bone
Shoot.
broth. I mean, we've kind of covered a lot of topics here, but is there anything else that we really need to know about that sort of is a hack into wellness and nutrition that's very financially accessible?
I mean, yeah, there's so many topics I want to cover. Did I cover the fact that you should be tracking your spending? Like, it doesn't really have to do with the nutrition side, but did I talk about this already? I don't think I did.
No? Let's hear it.
If you're interested in saving money on food, whether it's nutritious food or not, you should be tracking your spending. So I use an app called You Need a Budget, affectionately known as YNAB, YNAB. And I track my spending for everything, but you could use an Excel spreadsheet or whatnot. But yeah, that's besides the nutrition point. I just want to like throw that out there because I don't know if we're running out of time or whatever. But you should be, if you're interested in saving money on your grocery bill, you should be setting a goal and then tracking it and then monitoring that, and then the next month try to do the same. So I wanted to get that in there.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I think that,
Yeah.
you know, it's in alignment with what we're talking about, because wellness, as wellness and herbalism grows, you know, it's getting more expensive, actually. It's kind of surprising. It hasn't like democratized medicine. It's actually kind of marketed into pretty expensive packages, which
Yeah.
is very fun. And if we're talking about daily use and making things accessible for everyone, which herbalism has always been that, right? It's an accessible folk tradition. Having little hacks into how do we make this a part of our daily practice and make it affordable is important. So thanks for that tip. I probably personally spend way too much money on herbs. I'm like, you know, I love this. I love them, but I also forage a lot. So,
Yeah.
you know, just bringing that in, having a couple of plants, like house plants that are medicinal in your in your window is always an easy way to save a little bit on spices. But thank you for bringing that in. And yeah, we're almost at the top of the hour. So is there anything else we need to know? We've got the app now. We've got some ideas about preparations.
Yeah, I guess real quickly, I'll throw out a few different things. Sardines, eggs, oatmeal, organ meats are all like, they're all super cheap and they're all super nutrient rich. So I don't know if you wanted to dive into any of those.
Well,
but
I feel like you threw out a lot just now, but I could go deep into each one of those, but I'm going to really plug organ meats, especially beef liver. It's something that I've been using basically instead of, I find multivitamins really, I don't know, sometimes effective, sometimes they're not. I don't actually trust a lot of multivitamins, or don't find a lot of them effective. Like my favorite multivitamin right now is beef liver. It has it's so bioavailable with copper, B vitamins, iron. It's really, really nourishing. And I've, put people on beef liver pills that don't feel like they can actually eat beef liver, a couple of times a week. And it really, it makes a big difference in the level of nourishment they are receiving. And yeah, just the sense of relax and calm and the body functioning more effectively. So I'm just going to put a plug in for beef liver. It's pretty much one of my favorite supplements and foods. And I make a pate out of it personally, and put in I put an herbes de Provence. So I do like a French herbes de Provence with a lot of raw butter and beef liver into a pate. And that's one of my weekly practices for getting my multivitamins rather than buying a supplement, is just making a pate once a week with a lot of fresh herbs.
I love that. Pate is the way I primarily do it too, with grass-fed butter. Sometimes I'll eat it raw because I'm weird like that, but yes, absolutely.
Wait, what are you eating raw? The beef liver or the raw butter?
Well, the liver.
Oh, you'll eat a little bit of the liver raw, like you won't cook it?
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
That's pretty hardcore, Mason.
Yeah. If only you knew.
It's getting weird over there, isn't it? It's getting experimental.
I know, and I didn't even get to bust out all this other stuff, but it's all good. Next time.
Yeah, well, if anyone out there that's watching has any questions, we'll be on for another few minutes. But I just want to say it's been great I know this has been a pretty long time commitment of yours, and I actually don't hear a lot of people talking about it. So I want to thank you for
interesting.
Your commitment to having nourishment be part of the family life and part of your family culture too.
Yeah, absolutely. For whatever reason, I always get kind of nervous for these things, but Amanda's like, you talk about this stuff all the time. It's like your passion, you know what I mean? So yeah, and then I was like, oh yeah, I'm excited now. So yeah, I'm dedicated. I'll keep doing it. The Art of Frugal Nutrition, the course that we have, or whatever, the sliding scale course, it's going to be constantly added on to. So it's going to be this ongoing project of ours.
Yeah, and I'm just really interested in general and deep nourishment. I find that almost everyone that I see is fatigued or have some kind of burnout or deficiency. And it's happening now in younger and younger people. It's like 15-year-olds with stage 3 adrenal fatigue and 19-year-olds with adrenal fatigue and thyroid cancer. And it just, I know that there's iridologists that talk a lot about this, but that there's a slow, progressive pulling of our gene pool of chi, like that we're actually draining chi from the way that our lifestyle. And so epigenetically, we're passing less and less on to our children. And so I think it's really important to know how to kind of weave these things in on a daily basis, because people are burned out and they're tired, and it's unsustainable. So finding things that are more than just adaptogens, I think adaptogens are great, and we need like deep level nourishment and rebuilding.
Amen to that. And I just wanted to say, Heifers and Honeybees asked where they can find the links. We put it on the herbrally.com/blog. So it's the latest blog post. I'm trying to see if there's any other questions in here. I don't see any other questions as of now, but cool.
Well, thank you, Mason. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. Talk to you soon.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Don't eat too much raw beef liver, though. Don't eat.
I won't.
Keep it.
I'll keep it minimal.
All right. Bye.
All right. Bye, y'all.
And that's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks so much for listening to the Herb Rally podcast. If you'd like to hear more from us here at Herb Rally, we now have a text message community, believe it or not. Basically, it's just updates from us. We send about 1 to 7 texts per week, notifying you about new events, videos, courses, podcasts. You get the idea. It's pretty much like our email newsletter, just in text form. So if you'd like to receive text messages from Herb Rally, just text JOIN, that's JOIN, to the number 541-256-2895. Again, that's JOIN to number 541-256-2895. And to stop receiving texts, that's easy too. Just text STOP to the same number. It'll opt you out immediately. Okay, thanks again for listening. Have a great rest of your day.